Between 1945 and 1950, 5 people vanished in the shadow of Vermont's Glastenbury Mountain. A hunter, a college student, a veteran, a child, a hiker. They all disappeared within a few short miles, each leaving behind nothing but questions. Locals came to call it the Bennington Triangle, a place where compasses fail, trails twist, and time itself seems to slip away. Tonight, we're retracing those steps. 5 lives, 5 vanishings. One forest that keeps its secrets. Watching this Chapman Crime. Please subscribe and stay with me as we uncover the mysteries of the Bennington Triangle. November 12, 1945, the Green Mountains of Vermont. Snow had not yet fallen, but winter was already whispering through the valleys. 74-year-old Middie Rivers, a lifelong woodsman and respected local guide, led fur hunters from Bennington Hollow into the dense wilderness near Hell Hollow Brook. He knew these hills better than anyone, every ridge, every stream, every echo. The group hunted deer for most of the day without issue. At about 4 p.m., while returning toward camp, Middie walked ahead along the familiar trail near the Long Trail Junction. He carried a rifle and a bright canvas hunting coat. He promised to meet them by the truck only a few minutes ahead. He was never seen again. When the hunters reached the vehicle and found no sign of him, they assumed he'd paused to check the ridge. An hour later, concern turned to alarm. By dawn, dozens of men from Bennington joined the search, later expanding to 300 volunteers. They combed more than 25 square miles, the largest organized hunt Vermont had ever seen. National Guardsmen brought bloodhounds. Planes circled overhead. The dogs picked up Middie's scent briefly near a stream, then lost it where the trail split into 2 narrow draws. A few rifle cartridges were found scattered along the path, the kind Rivers routinely carried to load his .30 to .30 Winchester, but no weapon, coat, or tracks. After 2 weeks, the official search ended. Not a scrap of clothing or bone was ever recovered. Members of the hunting party later told reporters that Rivers had been cheerful that morning, talking about Thanksgiving plans and warning them about slick rock on the slopes. He had guided for decades without a single incident. Sheriff John Goddard noted, he simply walked out of sight and was gone. Locals described him as the sort of man who could live indefinitely in those woods, which made the disappearance all the more baffling. Investigators first suspected an accident, perhaps a fall into one of the many abandoned mine shafts dotting the region. Others proposed that he may have become disoriented in sudden fog or dusk, but those who knew him doubted it. Middie could navigate the Green Mountains blindfolded. A few whispered about foul play, an argument, a stray shot, though no evidence supported it. Within months, stories began to take on a different tone. People spoke of strange lights seen over Glastenbury Mountain and of compasses spinning near the old logging roads. Writers would later label the area the Bennington Triangle. Middie Rivers was the first known victim of that cluster. His disappearance marked the start of a 5-year period in which 4 others would vanish under similarly unexplained circumstances: Paula Welden in 1946, James Tedford in 1949, Paul Jepson and Frieda in 1950. To this day, no trace of Rivers has been found. Not a rifle, not a button, not a bone. The forest has reclaimed the hunting trails. Moss covers the stones where the searchers once stood shouting his name. Some say when the wind moves through Hell Hollow, you can still hear a faint answer, a man calling back, just out of sight. December 1st, 1946, Bennington, Vermont. A college student named Paula Welden told her roommate she was going for a short walk before dinner. She slipped on a red parka, jeans, and sneakers, light clothes for a cold winter afternoon, and stepped into the hills. She never came back. Paula was 18, a sophomore at Bennington College, quiet, smart, with a fascination for hiking. She had mentioned wanting to explore part of the Long Trail, a rugged 270-mile route that cut through the Green Mountains. That Sunday, the trail was nearly empty, just a handful of locals out before dark. Several people later recalled seeing a young woman in red walking north, hands in her pockets, head down against the wind. Then she vanished into the trees. When Paula didn't return that night, her roommate assumed she'd stayed with friends. By morning, panic spread across campus. Students, professors, and police scoured the nearby woods. The temperature dropped below freezing. Snow began to fall. They found no footprints, no clothing, no sign she had ever been there. The search grew into one of the largest in Vermont's history. Hundreds joined, soldiers, locals, even psychics. Planes flew grid patterns over the mountains. Bloodhounds tracked a scent for a few miles, then stopped dead at a fork in the trail. It was as if Paula had stepped off the face of the earth. Her father, a well-known engineer, arrived from Connecticut and criticized local police for being unprepared. That criticism eventually led Vermont to form its own state police force the following year, a legacy born from her disappearance. Rumors spread quickly. Some believed she ran away to start a new life. Others whispered about foul play, a drifter seen near the trail, a jealous boyfriend, a stranger in a pickup truck. But no evidence ever surfaced. The mountain stayed silent. Over the years, others would vanish in the same area, hunters, hikers, and travelers, giving rise to the name, the Bennington Triangle. Asterisk, locals say the woods there feel different, that compasses spin and echoes never come back the same. And on cold December evenings, when the mist hangs low, some claim to see a figure in red moving between the trees. Always walking north, always alone. December 1st, 1949. Exactly 3 years to the day after Paula Jean Welden vanished, another person disappeared in the same region, this time not from the woods, but from a moving Greyhound bus. His name was James E. Tedford, a 68-year-old veteran and resident of the Bennington Soldiers' Home. He had been visiting relatives in St. Albans, Vermont, and was returning to Bennington by bus, a 125-mile trip that should have ended before nightfall. Several passengers remembered him, quiet, polite, silver-haired, wearing a gray coat and a fedora. He carried a small duffel and a timetable tucked neatly into his pocket. The journey south was uneventful until the final stretch through the Green Mountains. The bus made its last stop before Bennington at a village called Shaftesbury, only 12 miles from his destination. When it pulled into Bennington Station, James Tedford was gone. His luggage still sat on the overhead rack. His bus ticket lay unused on the seat. Even his family's Christmas gifts remained neatly wrapped beside him. Fellow passengers told investigators that Tedford had been reading a timetable shortly after leaving Shaftesbury. When the bus driver called the next stop, Bennington, they noticed his seat empty. No one saw him stand. No one saw him exit. It was as if the seat had simply become vacant between towns. The driver insisted the doors had remained closed except at scheduled stops. Police retraced the route, searching every ditch, turnout, and ravine along Highway 7. No footprints in the snow, no clothing, no wallet. Officers from the Bennington Soldiers' Home confirmed that he had boarded the bus. Multiple witnesses saw him wave goodbye in St. Albans, but he never arrived back at the residence. For weeks, the Vermont State Police canvassed the area, questioning locals who lived near the road. No one had seen an elderly man walking or injured along the route. Weather records showed calm skies, light snow, and temperatures just below freezing, conditions that would have revealed tracks if he'd left the highway. A month later, investigators admitted they had no theory that fit the facts. If Tedford had suffered confusion or a medical episode, he still should have been found along the roadside. If he'd chosen to disappear deliberately, he'd done so with none of his money or identification. By 1950, locals began linking his case to the others. Middie Rivers had vanished 4 years earlier in the same mountain corridor. Paula Jean Welden had walked into the forest and never returned. Now James Tedford had vanished while surrounded by witnesses. Reporters from the Bennington Banner began calling the region the place that swallows men whole. Some investigators speculated that Tedford might have fallen asleep and accidentally exited during a rest stop the driver forgot to record. Others hinted at a darker possibility, robbery or assault, though none of his belongings were missing. And then there were the locals who already whispered about the Bennington Triangle, a place where people simply ceased to exist. Tedford's disappearance remains one of Vermont's most baffling missing person cases. No evidence, no remains, no witnesses beyond that half-dozen passengers who swore he was there 1 minute and gone the next. His empty seat and folded timetable were photographed for police records. Today those photos sit in a dusty archive in Montpelier. Some say that stretch of road between Shaftesbury and Bennington never feels right, that headlights dim and radios crackle with static. Truckers who drive it at night sometimes report glimpsing a man in a gray coat standing by the guardrail, waiting for a bus that never comes. 1950, Bennington, Vermont. 8-year-old Paul Jepson climbed into his mother's truck while she fed pigs at the family's small farm near Woodford Hollow. It was a routine afternoon, crisp air, dry leaves, the first touch of autumn chill. When she returned less than an hour later, the door of the truck was open. Her son was gone. Paul was a cheerful, curious boy known for following his parents around the farm. He wore a bright red jacket that day, easy to spot against the faded gold fields and dark pines. His mother thought he might have wandered toward the nearby long trail, less than half a mile away. She searched for an hour, calling his name through the trees before running to get help. By sunset, more than 50 volunteers joined the search. Within days, the number grew into the hundreds: police, firefighters, students, and soldiers. Bloodhounds tracked Paul's scent from the farmyard up a wooded slope toward the long trail. Then, just like with Paula Welden 4 years earlier, the scent stopped cold at a crossroads. No footprints, no fabric, nothing. Search teams scoured the area for over a week. They dragged ponds, combed riverbanks, and cut through thickets so dense that even small animals had trouble passing. Planes from the Vermont National Guard scanned from above. Nothing appeared. The trail ended as suddenly as it began. Several locals later told investigators they'd seen a small boy in a red jacket walking along the road near the trailhead around 3 p.m. that day, though none could say where he went. One truck driver claimed he saw him standing near a wooden fence looking toward the forest, then turning away as if he'd changed his mind. That was the last known sighting. Police considered the possibility of abduction, though no vehicles had been seen stopping in the area. There were rumors of wild animals, but searchers found no tracks, no torn clothing, and no blood. Some suspected that Paul might have fallen into one of the many abandoned shafts left over from Vermont's mining days. Dozens were checked and sealed, yet none contained any evidence. As days passed, the story began to take on a darker tone. Local newspapers noted the strange pattern: another disappearance in almost the same location as Paula Welden, both wearing red, both vanishing near the long trail. Reporters quietly began using a new phrase, the Bennington Triangle. Paul's parents were devastated. His father told a reporter, "It's like the woods just swallowed him." He later admitted he returned to the site every evening for months, calling his son's name into the dark. He never heard an answer. The official search ended after 8 days. No remains, no belongings, and no clues were ever recovered. Paul's disappearance joined the growing list of unexplained vanishings in the region. From Middie rivers in 1945 to James Tedford in 1949, every case shared the same radius of forest, the same silence, and the same lack of closure. Some say the mountain has its own way of keeping secrets. Others believe something or someone watches from those woods, waiting for anyone who wears red. To this day, no one has found a trace of the boy in the red jacket. October 28, 1950, Glastenbury Mountain, Vermont. 53-year-old Frieda set out on a short afternoon hike with her cousin Herbert Elsner near the Somerset Reservoir. She was a strong walker, familiar with every bend of the trail and every change in weather. She had lived in the area her whole life and was considered an expert in the woods. Only about a half-mile from camp, Frieda slipped on a rock crossing a shallow brook and soaked her clothes. Laughing it off, she told Herbert she'd run back to the tent to change and meet him there soon. It was a clear day with good visibility. Herbert watched her turn down the trail toward camp and walk out of sight. That was the last time anyone ever saw her alive. When Frieda didn't return within an hour, Herbert went back to camp himself. She wasn't there. He called her name for hours until dark fell and the temperature dropped below freezing. By morning, the search was underway. Dozens of locals, state police, and army personnel joined in. Bloodhounds were brought in again, and planes from the Vermont Aeronautics Commission flew grid patterns over the hills. For 8 days, they searched relentlessly. The dogs caught a faint scent near the brook where she fell, but lost it within yards. Teams scoured an area of 25 square miles, cutting fresh trails through dense brush and bog. No trace, not a shoe, not a piece of cloth was ever found. Search Captain Carl Harrington told reporters, "We've covered every inch twice over." It's as if she just disappeared into the air. Weather stayed clear the first few days, then a storm rolled in, turning the ground to mud and forcing the teams to withdraw. The official search ended after 10 days, though family and volunteers continued for weeks. On May 12, 1951, 7 months after she vanished, A group of loggers found a badly decomposed body lying on open ground near the reservoir. It was Frieda Langer. The discovery stunned everyone because the location had been searched multiple times before. Investigators could not determine a cause of death. There were no obvious injuries or signs of animal attack. Her clothing was mostly intact. How her body appeared in an area so heavily searched remains one of the strangest details in the entire Bennington Triangle story. Some believe she died elsewhere and was moved. Others say the terrain concealed her for months beneath snow and water. A few still insist she was placed there deliberately, long after the search had ended. Police records list her death as undetermined. Locals weren't satisfied. Frieda was fit, experienced, and within a mile of camp on a clear afternoon. There were no signs of violence or robbery. Her disappearance followed a pattern already etched into the region. Middie rivers, Paula Welden, James Tedford, Paul Jepson, all gone within 5 years and within the same 25-mile radius. Frieda Langer was the last known victim in the Bennington cluster. Her case closed the chapter, but never the mystery. To this day, residents speak of those years as the time the mountain was hungry. Hikers who walk the long trails say they sometimes found piles of stones shaped like a cross by the brook where she fell. No one knows who leaves them. The Bennington Triangle would fade from headlines, but never from memory. 5 people, from a 74-year-old guide to an 8-year-old boy, vanished there between 1945 and 1950. Only one was ever found, and even she returned without answers. For 75 years, the Bennington Triangle has guarded its secrets. Middie Rivers, Paula Welden, James Tedford, Paul Jepson, and Frieda Langer, 5 names whispered by the wind across Glastenbury Mountain. Their stories remain unsolved, but not forgotten. If you've enjoyed this investigation, please like, comment, and subscribe. It helps the channel grow and keeps these stories alive. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and if you ever find yourself on the long trail, mark your path. Because in Bennington, not everyone finds their way back.